Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have a terrific show today with two wonderful poets, Paul Vangelisti and Beth Ruscio. Paul Vangelisti is the author of more than 30 books of poetry, as well as a noted translator from Italian. In 2020, his book of poems, Motive and Opportunity, was published by Shearsman in the UK, and this past year, his newest book, Liquid Prisoner, appeared from Lithic Press in Colorado. In 2015, he edited Amari Baraka's posthumous collected poems, SOS Poems 1961-2014 for Grove Press. Vangelisti lives in Pasadena. For 5 decades, I have admired, respected, and learned from the poetry and scholarship of Paul Vangelisti. Paul has been a leader in poetry ever since he was a young man. I love Paul's book, Motive and Opportunity. Here's a brilliant poet, Paul Vangelisti.
Well, thank you. You can hear me, Harry?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the generous introduction. Yes, and we've been going at this for 50 years, haven't we, Harry?
That's it.
Yeah, last year we thought we were going to do a thing, and we still might, since we're back live now in bookstores. We thought we'd do a co-reading, Harry and I, called 100 years of poetry. So, yeah, I want to read from the new book called Liquid Prisoner, and I'm going to read it with a little trepidation because I have before me two professional actors, and this is a book that's a reading of Shakespeare's sonnets. And as you know, he was a professional actor. And the book is really reflections on his sonnets. I reflected on the even-numbered sonnets, 2 through 158 and 156. I gave them to everybody's adding to Shakespeare's canon all the time. I just want one word about the title. The title comes from sonnet number 5, where Shakespeare says he's talking about a mirror. And he might as well be talking about the theater. You actors understand this a lot better than I do. Where he says, essentially, the poet, the actor, etc., is a liquid prisoner pent in walls of glass. And the whole undertaking of the sonnet at that time, particularly when Shakespeare was writing them, it's hard for us to believe that it was like the hottest thing to publish at the end of the 16th, beginning of the 17th century. There were sonnet collections being published left, right, and center. They had been imported from Italy, and they were very, very popular. And at the same time, there was a technology that had been imported from Italy. Just like the sonnet is a technology, hard for us to think of that, perhaps, but there was a technology that was made available to the middle classes all the way through the society, and that was the glass mirror that was being imported from Venice. So many scholars have written about the sonnet, and they most of them claim that it's no accident that the sonnet had this explosion at the same time that the mirror had been introduced into British society. So anyway, so all through my readings, you'll hear the question of the mirror, the liquid prisoner, the liquid stage, all of that, where the actor and the poet perform. I'm just going to read through these without explanation. If you hear a lot of standards, jazz standards, words from jazz standards, it's no accident. They're in here too, along with the mirrors. So I'll start with my sonnet number 2. There are 77 in all that I did. Number like the memory of water, diluted with every dripping moment, some revised or at least made reckless by age, the ruse of years one overlooks each morning. What a waste indeed, what missed opportunity, and with that peach, another drop of rhyme to dilute this moment. Diluted, maybe even happily so, with the tomorrow one ignores, forgetting once forgotten, much too sadly like the one about old men pissing, regretful that they may no longer even lie. I think about you as you too begin to lie the moment you start counting. I'm going to skip forward to sonnet number 13. How old must grief appear to the old? Date it now and then, soon as you're ready to behold the hurt, the squander of love, expiating the wasting animal. One will sound far older in denying one's heart the turmoil of suffering, scrupulous or not, with the daily pain art, however modest, adjusts to living. Wary of all that's mean or facile, will you force the discipline making one chary to accord death the least alibi and ill-gotten dominion? What one might hope to gain by going gently assumes a good night, not your artless, bloody demon at the door. And as you'll gather throughout, these are truly the sins of my old age, and aging is a theme throughout these. I started them when I was 72, and I finished them just before my 75th birthday. So here we are, number 33. Tired of trying, though yet untried, by what ill may score pages as after and before. Liar enough to stay one's luck, and haply will more days for dreaming these islands born again of an offending science. Misplaced as one's weary affections may be, forsworn weakly with a grumbling peak, not yet disgraced in the shifting climes of friendship. And so the power, pimping simplicity, and the meager rule, too often trumpeting a tawdry notion of death's seniority. And why mortality misprize the strumpet's skill to cry like a poet about what could be, and the willfulness reserved for what is gone. (38) Belonging, a state one's condemned to bearing as we grow meaner, too often longing for some origin or grievance not there. Of course, Miss Stein said it of Oakland, though there's no there's becoming a staple of less than urban everyday life. Go on now. The rest of us are not above being fatally out of place. Okay, remember it's Friday afternoon. East on 3rd, top down, and the pale sky leaving one a say in the inescapable present. Least but not last. Astonish me, dearest, with crimes you have never committed, those times without opportunity or motive. 39. The very thought of you, a fluent enough wing to escape the curse of belonging, the airy nothing one needs do to avoid singing to the avoidable suburbs just outside our hearts. In other words, styles an afterthought when those walk in who must use any other name to claim a life, compile as many versions of themselves to be forgiven. to invoke you as my muse, advancing the mere idea of you and the majesty of your damaged grace, chancing ignorance and that most senseless crime of years with lunatic verses and rhyming moons you may never hear. Mirror, mirror, like a sail, and again a spanking wind in the corners of the eyes, more bleary than age would alibi. Listing to rhyme-forced sleep, nodding count of no account, as every day his dog and every dupe a duchess. Unless liquid flaunt the stranger on each stage, the actor whose very line prisons the air in the glass, sand pouring through the fingers like a melody doubling as an ending in brass, maybe, and ratcheting harmonies spiking the crow's rattle on the cedar. Again and again, no sounding shadows as when the hill's colors chitter to the surface. Oh, extravagantly fickle engine, disproportionately riskier than once measured at any level. Briskly in personal leisure, mostly all dressed up with no place to go. Please, do have some pity. Here alone and small in this lost city, suspect the ease the lovely morning concentrates on you. A story of faults concealed in the personal willy-nilly at fault. One fine romance and no glory now in play, only the long-running flesh, never looking back even to this one everyday room where good words decay. Imperfectly mechanical, thus tempered by the personal redressing a world hell-bent on spite, despite the dreadful and whimsical dark pressing other grief. Cross any ocean or barren sierra, you'll find the elephant waiting, the innocence lost, the first night iffy sleep wouldn't come. Jewel of Venus, the blushing Mars, bracket your dreams like the small talk they are in all this emptiness beyond the missing fates back home. Overthrow the sorrow, the small because left behind, the familiar taste of nothing like water, the loss of the last willful thing one remembers doing. Number 61. Be the sonnet a younger man's blameless tool, more distinguished by passion than remorse. Me, the stage, me, the curtain, another crime deplored for embarrassment, just in case. Memory's hardly the most compelling player. Bold action rarely follows, without enough eternity to recall our gifts forgiven. Hold on to any whim instead of wanting. Poor eyesight's a matchless faculty of age, heart and a little beyond the date for misremembering and doing our part in the story. This unlikely plot misses nothing. Here, I am often pleased to subsist on fancy and shaky omens. If weakness moves more than one's willing to admit, might it be pure will powers the mind, seeking reason more insufficient to the sight of misery and pain? Admittedly, swayed as one is by others' distaste for your skill, yet your sudden grin may easily make my day, a chortle blurring innocence. Is it weakness then adores your cunning, your refusing the logic of banality as a style no more becoming than practical shoes? Your magic exceeds all belief in kindness, daring to be the most telling in the room. Everything ends too soon, darling, too soon. And these are the last two in the sequence. This impossible republic, without a voice and a monumental silence in place of speech, or peace that once meant quiet. Myth in spite of image, as magic presumes to kiss the starlight and instruct the moon. Belief is nothing like trust, lunatic enough to reach a few conclusions. Chief among them, imagination. Brash is the dizzy romance of a piazza, cheaper under the circumstances. Having a chance conveniently at rhyme, deep as the impulse to dream may run, the allure remains in being alive, to conjure up a hunger for you. Finishing in the shaky hands of desire, disaffected in every way with this suspicious remedy. The general in respect to heat feels more specific than once reckoned, and the heart anyway, moving off, looking over your shoulder. Renouncing won't help the embarrassment or approving the loss when the terms are punitive as dear. Delight won't stall while ending stays unsettling dawn and scars the night with blame. Deny what you must and spend the last few verses trying the simplest knot of desire to spy a melody in the sun.
Was it great? Paul, are you going to read some more poetry, or do you want to talk about these?
I'd like to talk with both of you.
Okay.
You know, it's LA.
Yeah.
We don't get enough talk.
Well, let me just start off, and then we'll bring in Beth. You know, thank you for astonishing us with this symmetrical, traditional, transcending, and oddly enough, vulnerable form. And so my first question to you would be, when you set out, was this did you set out the perimeters? Was this a closed form or an open form in this particular work?
Well, you know, that's a really good question. And I did 2 books previously of sonnets using the so-called Italian or Petrarchan form, right? The A, B, B, A, C, D, D, C, E, F, G, E, F, G, which is the most flexible, right? And all my life, I stayed away from the Shakespearean form because supposedly it's very closed with that couplet at the end, right? And then the more I got into it, I discovered, like all easy ideas, it's not the case. And also mine, as you may hear, I mean, you don't see them in front of you, they rhyme at the beginning of the lines. They don't rhyme at the end. All these. It's a gimmick I used in the other one. It's a musical way to push the line faster down the page. So the more I get into the end, the couplet for me doesn't wrap things up. It makes things even more problematic. It makes things even more confusing, you know, like life.
Or ambiguous. Or ambiguous.
That's what I mean. It makes it more open-ended. When you seem to be closing it off, you're doing exactly the opposite.
Well, you know, when we look back at Shakespeare's, I always thought there were 154, but you say 156, and you're the scholar.
154. That was my error. 154. 77 twice, right? 154.
And, you know, we look back on Shakespeare, and I don't know, 120 to 124 may have been to a young man. The rest may have been to the dark lady. Are we going to have to wait for some historian in the future to ask or do some research and find out who this woman is, or is there multiple, or are you going to reveal the source or your interior paramour, as Stevens might say?
Yeah, no, the one at the end is my wife anyway, and yeah, the Shakespeare thing is so complicated, because before I did these, I really got into it, and in the book, I thank several people, and one of them is the latest version of the sonnets by just a fabulous, for me to say, truly great scholar who does what a scholar should do, not interpret things, but lay things out and let you see what's going on. Her name is Catherine Duncan Jones. It's the Arden Shakespeare. I think it came out in '99. And she's magnificent. And the poems are, on the right-hand side is the poem, on the left-hand side are the notes, right? And they opened up the poems for me. They made it infinitely more complicated. And ironically, she, by the way, is the mother of a very well-known translator, the one whose new version of the Odyssey, I can't remember her first name, but her last name is Wilson. New, very well received, and believe it or not, a best-selling Odyssey. But it really shows what scholarship can do, and it really helps, because the more I read the notes, the more I got trapped in the poems, and the more I thought, and it's the mirror. You're falling into the mirror. There's no question.
Well, I have one more question, and then I'll bring Beth in. Over the years, looking generally at your writing, would you consider yourself to be a narrative poet or an anti-narrative, or you have a mixture? You're always experimenting. I know that for sure. Do you have any? Is that too simple a question to give a simple answer to, or how would you?
No. I can try in under a minute. I've written 3 or 4 narrative poems, that is, novels in verse, with characters in it and people that speak and all that. But the rest, I feel they're lyrics. And if you want to call them, somebody came up, people are always coming up with terms that, anyway, whatever it's worth, somebody in the early 2000s started talking about the philosophical lyric. I don't know if that means anything, but anyway, they're poems. I got to write them. You can't stop singing. That's it. So these are lyrics, clearly.
Thank you, Paul. And here's Beth.
Oh gosh, Paul, that just was transporting the whole set. The music was evident, and I'm so glad that you told us the secret ingredient, the rhyming first words. What a great strategy to make it your own. And I'm gonna talk about what you first mentioned, that you were trepidatious about 2 actors being here. But I think all poets, when they're reading their work and they're involved with their work, they're doing the same work that actors do, which is to channel, to essentially find the voice of the poem, the voice of the character, and advocate for that, voice in the form of reading to other people. Then the other thing about poetry in general, I'm sure, I don't know how you feel about this, but I bet you can concur or something, or you can weigh in on it. Poetry gets intimate so fast. When you're in a room with poets, the conversation gets so intimate, even with people you just met. And there's a way in which that, touches a chord in people that opens them up too. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Now I'm getting incoherent because I'm sort of lost in the feeling of it. Yeah. But your sonnets, are they 14 lines?
Oh yeah, they're there's shakes A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G.
Yeah.
And I'll just add one brief note. They're not mine because I dreamt them. That is to say, I was in 2013, I was at a conference when I was still working, and I had to go to those things at UCLA, an academic conference. And, you know, the damn thing, it just put me to sleep. They were all getting up, one attacking the other person. And I fell asleep. And while I was sleeping, I dreamt the sonnets that rhyme at the beginning of the lines. I woke up and I wrote one down. It was terrible, but the form was there, right? And that's how it happened in running away from the so-called real world.
Wow.
I swear to God.
You know, I've been experimenting with a form that somebody called it recombinant poetics.
Mm.
But all it is there was a phrase in a Carl Phillips poem that I loved. You break my heart, I'll break yours.
Hmm.
And I took that phrase and I broke it down into its alphabet, and wrote a sonnet length poem. It's not, there's no rhyme scheme to it. But then I applied that to a number of, there's a few of them in the book, speaking parts. And there's a way in which that captures without, how do I say this? You know, without plagiarizing this other phrase, some of that somehow is migrated into the poem. The meaning of that poem is somehow migrated in just by virtue of the vowels and consonants that are in that phrase. It's pretty remarkable. I've actually taught it in workshops, and it's it's kind of it's the kind of thing that you can carry around in your head for days, and you go, oh, that's part of my alphabet. Oh, there's a letter that I can use. So, but I don't want to get too much into the weeds here. But we could.
I love the weeds, but anyway.
What when you are you teaching still?
No, I haven't. I will be working this summer for UCLA in Italy, bringing travel with a bunch of librarians. Believe it or not. Yeah. And we're going to be looking at books, and historical books. We'll see first edition of Dante, 1470, whatever. Whatever. I can't remember his name. I should remember this. It's published in Italy, but it's a German name, the printer. And we'll be looking at, Incanabula. We'll be looking at all kinds of things. And the thing is called the California Rare Book School. And it comes out of UCLA. And it's a summer program. It's run by Robert Montoya, who's a professor of library information and library science, now it's called. And I'll lead discussions. I won't be teaching. I miss it. It's been 4 years.
Weren't you affiliated with Otis School of Art and Design?
I founded the graduate writing program.
Well, there you go. So, I was a mentor there for about a dozen years.
I read that in the, it was in the digital imaging department?
No, actually, we did this project where we would take 20-year-old art students to the Culver City Senior Center. Uh-huh. We would interview, 80 and 90-year-olds, uh-huh. and we would create presentations based on interviews that we did, and they would be augmented by their artwork.
Interesting.
And then we'd create a document, kind of an artful document, along with are you familiar with Anna Devere Smith?
Yeah.
So we used that method, which is to say we took interviews and we used their exact verbatim transcript to use their own words to talk about their own lives. Anyway, I kept thinking that maybe one day I'd run into you in the hallway.
Well, it's a real commuter campus. You don't sort of run into. I was stuck there 5 days a week, at a desk and all that because I was an administrator. But yeah, I hardly no, I never ran into you, and I didn't run into that many people anyway.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Beth. And now let's move on to Beth Ruscio. Beth Ruscio is a widely published poet who won the Brick Road Poetry Prize for her collection, Speaking Parts, published in August 2020. The daughter and granddaughter of actors, she is also an accomplished, award-winning veteran actress of the stage and on-screen, large and small. She's been a longtime mentor at Otis College of Art and Design, facilitated the long-running Wednesday night poetry workshop at Beyond Broke, and is part of the writing acting team at LMU for their Hidden Heroes program. Later this year, her essay, In Praise of Humble Ingredients, Exalted, and poem Summer Calling will be published in Outlaw Theater by Padua Playwrights Press and Theater Communications Group. John Brantingham in Cultural Weekly wrote, quote, Speaking Parts is an exceptional collection exploring ideas that I've never explored myself. Beth Ruscio has spent a career acting, and she is able to bring the wisdom of that career with her to show us what it means to be human, end of quote. An erudite chameleon, both in poetry and acting, Beth has blessed the poetry community with her own splendid poetry, as well as with her devotion to the tradition of poetry and her support of her fellow poets. She brings her mind as well as her heart into her poetry. A magnificent poet, Beth Ruscio.
Oh my. Thank you, Harry. Thank you so much. I'm tempted to change my entire set because of Paul's sonnets, but maybe if I have time at the end, I'll sneak one of those poems in. The set that I chose takes poems from my book, from this book, and pairs them with poems from my new manuscript called 0% Containment. So sometimes the connections are overt, sometimes they're kind of subtle, but I'm hoping that you can have fun. The geometry of watching. Plant your feet in the night, hands in your pockets. Triangulate those elbows. Tense up the hypotenuse of each arm, finger on the trigger of a gun in every pocket. Misters 1, 2, 3, and 4 stand in front, halfway between a huddle and a posse, a pie slice away from parallel. And one of you, Mr. 5, can lag behind, just that space, and we'll know you're suspicious. Out of frame, the light source is set to stun you full in the face as the horizon cuts you off at the knees. It's working now, guys. Look at the light directly. Give us your longest shadows. Show goes on. This is for my dad. This is about his last audition. Show goes on. Do I look like a judge? Dad crosses his arms, gives me his left profile. I peel off the Kleenex from his chin. The nick stopped bleeding. He's on such a high dose of blood thinners, and the walk across the whole Warner Brothers lot is a test. We pass costumed cops horsing around, dueling with red licorice whips. What are you, wise guys? He parries in his best three-pieced suit, sweat clean through. And as if down a gangplank, he walks into casting, affecting a halting gait, buying time. His hello, darling, once deployed to debonair effect, except today. He's rushing through the lines, voice climbing an octave, heart pumping, a brakeless bicycle down a steep hill. Then whoosh, out the door, they hustle him. The hollow kudos fade. Faint praise damns him, escorting us into the outside heat. A touch of sandpaper roughs up his melodic voice. Let's sit. He can't stand. And everything around us is pretend. A grassy New England park, a band shell. We sit on a bench shaped like a whale, looking out, both audience and on display. There is the church there, the steeple. Open the door, see it's an exterior set, a white wall propped up on wooden elbows. My grandmother was also an actress. How could I help myself? She was a comedian, and this poem is about her painting. Untitled number 1. Self-taught, my comedian grandmother, Nydia, painted watercolors, cheerful naives, bucolic backstage scenes, horseplay, a throng of strawberry-haired kids racing, awash in pastels. Then, at the end, she took up oils, thick smells of turpentine, linseed replacing violet water, palettes of lamp black and oxide brown, alizarin crimson. I have her last portrait of a woman not young anymore, in a pale picture hat, her complexion veiled in brown, as if she's behind a scrim. Light source at a high angle, deep set eyes, shaded, gleamless. At her funeral, my first one, Mom dressed us in upbeat white. I bit the inside of my cheek till it bled. She'd spoken like a calliope sounded, a splendid, bright mirage she'd kept aloft, and beneath a self I didn't know, this sober garnet undertow. With time, it's only darkened more, this honest portrait. Sick, not old. The palest pink, drained of health, lips painted shut with a muddied red. I cannot enter, can only describe this painting, spilling my own salt, deep secrets. I hover so close, my breath is fogging up the glass. I'm her age when she painted this. Pacific Grove, California. Ladies Sketch Club on the beach. 1890. To order light, dear sister, to wield a vest pocket clock and boss around the day is not considered women's work. Yet truly I live on scrapes of Prussian blue and gamboge crimson, go through tubes and tubes of bright lead white, the cruelest white for foam and spray and ocean, pinned down with my palette knife. I'm under a raucous spell of light, and the sea swelling in me, the dried colors caked under my fingernails, all the proof I need. Let my smocks, neglected yellow and gray, I don't care. Only let me wait out for the golden hour. See how it polishes even a crude thing like my sweat to a flushed glamour. It's not order, cleanliness, Not our father's God I serve. Behold my sin, like beach tar, whiskered blackly in sand and burnt umber. As much the hours as the crosses. Tonight, waiting at a long red light, I watch a man on the median fold in half his broke plus anything will help cardboard sign and shove it down the back of his loose jeans, a grimy brace which pulls his shoulders to attention militarily, picks up his chin. Later, that nightmare where my legs don't work, and the one where Giacometti thin neighbors come out onto their front stoops and puff up like sails. Their cotton lawn shirts have Peter Pan collars, the rounded collars of my home ec final. A girl I knew sewed through her index finger just to get out of redoing her French seams. In the morning, Dad will call, sounding far off as if a spaceship took him in his sleep and he's only just been beamed back to bed. Glad to see the sun come up, he'll say. Here's your mother. In the sweltering afternoon, making sherbet with my niece from You Pick Bing cherries. First batch cooks up tasting like the pan, the long simmered Christmas cassoulet, and instantly, and once again, the air thickens, the sound of that winter when the skies opened up like punishment, the windows fogged over, and the expectant appetites of the last guests to leave. My dad, hungering still to be caught up in any old jubilation, making this kitchen an island, this poem without an end. Rest my eyes. Before this day, which begins upside down at 12:30 p.m., writing as I do, past 4, past 5, the night chased away, and sleep once it's light outside. Grape nuts at lunchtime, Friday, the day I have to face it. Teeth need fixing on both sides now. Rosie at Dr. Waterman's says it's all those masks and the gnashing. Sweating in the freezer section, basket so full it might break, heart racing. Forgot my morning beta blocker. Us and our hearts. Chew a chalky aspirin at checkout. Leon eats leftovers, pork tenderloin, caramelized onion, roasted Yukon Golds, and cherries on ice in their own bowl because, I tell you, their season is short. Live it up. Tom Waits is on Spotify as I wipe down the counter. The evening fell just like a star and left a trail behind. You spit as you slammed out the door. As my college roommate used to say, you want to listen to Tom Waits or you want a handful of downs? Leon and I walk, and on our way, you see 2 empty brown leather shoes, the right shoe, one pace ahead of the left. Look, someone's been raptured. 6:30 news, and I braid my long pandemic hair longer than I wore it as a kid, white at the roots, then gray, then chestnut. They pull a Palestinian girl, maybe she's 9, from the blasted ruins, the broken, the sewers, and shit-strewn streets of the West Bank. And this girl, caked in plaster dust, her body slack, then she blinks. Cheers drown out her crying. What there is to live for, I'd try to tell you, but only fail. And who am I to know which of us survived the worst? Because you'd be 28 this year, and when I rest my eyes in the early light, it stings. End over end, endeavor. It was dumb luck. I did not move a muscle to stand with throngs, waiting for her to streak over Griffith Park Observatory. I did not tool down to Santa Monica Beach when KNBC threw it to Colleen Williams. She's just leaving Venice Pier, flying inland due east, low and salutary. I was taking 3 steps out onto an empty Culver Street. Boom. I alone looked up to see you, endeavor. You death-defying sky queen, piggyback on a 747, fly over, dip, and bank away, paying out a sonic wave of shadow between us. Dear Mom, imagine both you and Endeavor in low houses now, hangared, through with rising. Again and again, it was dumb pain and you wanting only to leave. Take me, please, away from here. And Endeavor could only streak bye-bye, and I could only walk you to the gate. I did not get your high cheekbones from some Cherokee blood way back, or feel 4 souls come through me, or ever feel as inconsolable. Lament nothing is how you lived, because nothing is ever really lost, but fearful of so much, not just oblivion, the water, food, left turns. It terrifies me how alive I feel, Mom, to live on alone, to look up and not see you with your head bent toward a book, keeping your place with chubby fingers, the same fatties which type this note. A failure of imagination has cast us in different worlds. I could fail you more by lamenting. It is not such a leap to believe you two can defeat gravity, Mom. Catch the mighty updraft, come out on high, a queen, and breaking with mere atmosphere in death. Defy the percentages. You, an Endeavor, the hurtling acrobats, cross a Pacific sky, become salutary shadows, going wide and far from me. 0% containment. Old trees are our parents. Henry David Thoreau. When Dad, then Mom, died, we buried them in trees, shrugged off pricey mahogany and other bewildering choices, walnut, Heartland cedar, cherry. Had we found the piece of paper, their final wishes were plain pine boxes. We chose the same hardwood they'd walked on for 40 years, golden oak. In the dark forest of the underworld to which I have nightly entree, our parents' oak caskets, the lowered boxes we shopped for, revert to their old lives, sprouting roots, reborn above ground as saplings. The white satin shrouds have migrated with them, gleaming in the open air, swaddling the unsteady fledglings as they rise. Listen up. The sky is a canvas, primed, pulled taut, and all the rivers named. Shade gathers round us like a dirndl skirt, cinched up, thinned woods, half kindling, half pine needles, fallen. Out in the field, dry whispers rise to precipitation. Listen. Beneath cankered bark, we are green, drought dormant, but eager as saplings to feed on a thundered morning. The square is full of noise. Breathe. Dive beyond the dominion of roots, where new worlds are nursed, where what could sustain us struggles, reaching. And here's my last poem, Negative Capability. Our birthday gal, Lori, weighted as a Sherpa in her many shawls, lynx-eyed and arms tired of holding her place, says more than once, "Now, where was I?" She's been keeping tabs on Henrietta, 97, 2 days from now, her mother, on a pink video baby monitor. Upstairs, Henrietta resides in the liminal space between no longer and not yet. Slant the chances she'll rally for a Pimm's cup at sunset. Of hours her mother's stopped keeping track. She's sleeping off the effort of putting on a clean pair of sweatpants and scarf. Pandemic apart, we women reconnect the dots. A 1 day a year affair. It's our 28th February 16th so far. Carl, maker of the feast we've just inhaled, and ever the showman, leads us the steep way down and down the terraced escarpment, and the path resembles him. It zigzags dramatically. In a clutch, we gather the guts to follow. One of us had foot surgery, one a tiny cancer. 2 have lost a husband, and the most game of us already dead. Still, we achieve the clearing at the bottom, a flat strip for a theater, and stage left, a grand California pepper tree, its crown level with the house's roof, and mantled by its weeping habit, an open-air deck he's built, cradled in branches. Up a ladder he glides to his handmade heaven, and from the inner above beckons us.
Thank you for such a fabulous reading, Beth. You know, you used a couple words, water and precipitation, and it seems that's what you do, the inner and the outer. You know, your reading was very vital and melodic and vivid, and you have such an excellent use of language, and you almost take the act of, you do take the act of acting, and also the poems about your family, and you transcend them with art, but in a very complex human way. And it just seemed very fluid and very poignant. And I know Paul has written a wonderful review of one of your books, I believe in the LA Review of Books. So
yes, thank you, Paul.
Oh, no, you're most welcome.
We have about 4 minutes left. And so, Paul, why don't you say a few words? You've examined her work very scholarly.
Well, you're always pretty. I'm not a scholar, but I like scholars, and I've been around them. But yeah, I was. You put your finger on it. I was really stunned by the voice. You know, the what Yeats called the singing voice, which is an ordinary voice, but it sings. You know, and talking about ordinary things. Well, I mean, the pieces about your mom and your dad, the piece about your dad and his lost audition is just, anyway, and they're not sentimental. That's what I like about them. They're just very straightforward, and they sing.
You know, my parents were both actors, as you already know, and my grandparents. In fact, it goes way back, all the way to England, in fact, all the way to a Shakespearean troupe in England.
Right.
So I'm sixth generation of my family to be an actor. But what it meant around the house was that, and I dedicated the book to them because they gave me, you know, a love for the spoken word. You know, they would sit us down at every night when we had dinner, and we had to express ourselves. You know, we had to, you know, I remember if anybody started a sentence with "well," my dad would say, "A well is a hole in the ground." So we had to keep up with them, and you know, there just was daily quoting from Shakespeare, from Chekhov, from Tennessee Williams, from, you know, there was always that in the that kind of music in the air, the spoken, you know, music of words that are meant to be spoken, and so I caught it. You know, I inherited it, and I caught it. My ear understands rhythm and meter almost automatically. It's, you know, now I'm incoherent as I'm lost in that.
Well, it's always very personal and real. You know, sometimes actors, when they read poetry, many times they overdo it. But you're always such a real person. As you know, I always prefer to hear the poets read their own poetry. That's my, you know, what I like. It doesn't mean everybody has to, but you two both are fabulous. I would just like to say one quick thing to each one of you. We just have a minute or two left. Just quickly, could you say one of your or two of your influences, Paul, and then the same with you, Beth, of poets who lived before you were writing seriously? Paul?
Yeah. Ezra Pound, Amiri Baraka, Jack Spicer, Robert Creeley.
How about you, Beth?
Well, Adrienne Rich, because of the length of her oeuvre. I mean, she just wrote she wrote all the livelong day. I often go back to her, but I continue to be turned on to new poets almost every day. Dorianne Laux, Claudia Rankine. You know, whenever you ask this question, I think, oh my God, all these boyfriends I have. All these. I'm very promiscuous. I think that's my answer. I fall in love with a new poet almost every day. And now that I've heard is your book published? Is this book out, Paul?
Oh yeah, it's been out for a year.
Then I'll go get that. I'll fall in love with you too.
Oh, thank you.
I already
pleasure.
Well, thank you both. It's 1 minute to 2, and Jennifer Clymer is going to take us into the next hour or more hours. And here's Jennifer. What would you like to say to wrap it up? But before I turn it over to you, Jennifer, let me just say one last time, thank you, Beth, and thank you, Paul. You both are marvelous, and you've uplifted me, and exalted us all with your knowledge and great poetry. So, and your reading. And so thank you very much. Here's Jennifer.
Thank you.
I echo that. Just thank you. Thanks for helping us kick off Poetry Month. We have been celebrating poetry long before the pandemic, when Harry would invite people to campus for these epic readings, and to have it part of our, weekly ritual now. I love that we can focus on it in April, but it does not diminish the rest of the year. We love poetry. We love the celebration of language, and thank you guys for helping us continue to do that.
Well, I love this shelf. This is my Tuesday. This is my Tuesday hit. I can't start my Tuesday without this. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
I know we have the caption contest next, and then You Be the Critic later. Harry, what do you have on tap for next week? What's going on?
Next week, we have two excellent poets, Marcia De La O and Phil Taggart from Ventura. So thank you both, and thank you, Jennifer.